We've all heard of the mysterious magic mushroom, but how much is really known about the hallucinogenic effects? This magic mushroom, also known by its scientific name, psilocybin, is a classic psychedelic drug. The effects of psilocybin on the overall body, the neuropharmacology, and new studies relating to the use of psilocybin to treat depression will be discussed. These magic mushrooms, when taken, are known to cause hallucinogenic events, causing the individual to experience apparent perceptions of something that's not there. This is known as tripping. People who are tripping may see things in different colors, see patterns, and existing sounds, tastes, and textures may be distorted. The acute effects of psilocybin in humans are characterized by changes in perception, cognition, emotions, and induction of psychotic-like symptoms that resemble early stages of schizophrenia. Shrooms are thought to produce most of their effects by acting on the neural highways in the brain that use the neurotransmitter serotonin. Psilocybin binds to the same receptors in the brain as serotonin, which causes alteration in mood. These mushrooms also affect the brain's prefrontal cortex. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, magic mushrooms can lead to feelings of relaxation that are similar to the effects of low doses of marijuana. Although the effects of psilocybin are relatively harmless, overconsumption can lead to the development of anxiety or severe panic attacks. Individuals may experience what is known as a bad trip, ultimately, which is an unpleasant negative reaction to the hallucinogenic effects. There is also the potential for poisoning and death if the wrong type of mushroom is consumed. Some of the side effects of psilocybin include paranoia, psychosis, excessive sweating, dilated pupils, nausea, blurred vision, and loss of appetite. Although the long-term effects have not been well defined through these short-term studies, there have been cases that have been reported in which individuals experience a hallucinogen-induced persistent perception disorder, also known as flashbacks. Essentially, the person re-experiences the effects of psilocybin even after not using the drug for a period of time. This may cause increased anxiety and distress to the individual and is often misdiagnosed as schizophrenia. Interestingly, 94% of individuals who have taken shrooms have said that the experience has altered their life in a positive way. Researchers have followed up with individuals who have consumed shrooms a year after consumption, and almost 66% have said that the experience has been one of the most important in their lives. Individuals have reported that they have felt more open and more imaginative, as well as more appreciative of the world around them. With there being nearly 200 species of these mushrooms, individuals must be very careful when consuming to ensure that they do not take the wrong type of mushroom, which can lead to death. Psilocybin was first extracted by a Swedish chemist, Albert Hofmann, in 1957. Ever since, magic mushrooms have become one of the most widely used recreational psychotropic drugs, with a 2003 survey stating that 8% of adults over the age of 26 in the United States have used magic mushrooms. Although more research has been started to be conducted, the DSM-5 refers to excess use of psilocybin as other hallucinogenic use disorder. Now let's begin to dive deep into understanding psilocybin and its effects. Researchers have seen that when administering psilocybin under controlled conditions, the brain actually reorganized connections and linked previously unconnected regions of the brain, causing the brain to become hyperconnected. Once the drug began to wear off, the connections returned to normal. Pictured above is a visualization of the brain connections in a person on psilocybin, pictured on the right, and someone who is given a placebo, pictured on the left. To get a better understanding of what was occurring in the brain, researcher Ted Gazucci and his team analyzed data gathered from 15 volunteers who were giving psilocybin intravenously while laying under an fMRI scanner. For anyone unfamiliar, fMRI stands for Functional Magnetic Resonance Imaging Scanner, which measures brain activity by detecting changes in blood flow. Volunteers were given 2 scans, both under the influence of psilocybin and when injected with a placebo. The researchers looked at fluctuations in what is known as the blood oxygen level dependent signal, which tracks activity levels in the brain. They found that in individuals administered psilocybin, activity in the more primitive brain network linked to emotional thinking became more distinct. It was seen that several parts of the brain, including the hippocampus and anterior cingulate cortex, became active at the same time. This is a pattern that's very similar to people who are dreaming. They also found that volunteers on psilocybin had more jumbled and uncoordinated activity in the brain network that's linked to higher level thinking. Overall, it was seen that the psychedelic state associated with psilocybin consumption causes a less constrained and more imaginative way of thinking. The openness towards new experiences, including with imagination, creativity, and aesthetic appreciation, was seen even after 1 year of psilocybin consumption. After ingestion, psilocybin is enzymatically converted to psilocin, which is the actual psychoactive agent causing the hallucinations. Psilocin is the main metabolite of psilocybin, acting as an antagonist at the 5-HT2A receptor, but it is also seen to work on the 5-HT2C and 5-HT1A receptors. Once psilocin reaches the brain, it prevents the reuptake of serotonin, leaving it in the synapse. Experiments with rats have showed psilocybin to interact mainly with serotonin receptors of the dorsal raphe nucleus. Due to the inhibiting influence of the neurons of the dorsal raphe nucleus, an activation of noradrenergic neurons in the nearby locus coeruleus was induced. The locus coeruleus represents a major center for integration of sensory input. Researchers believe that this may explain some forms of perceptual alterations experienced. Researchers have also seen that activating the limbic dopaminergic system plays a secondary role in being responsible for some of the emotional effects of psilocybin. The photo above shows how psilocin increases extracellular glutamate levels in the prefrontal cortex. Psilocin binds to serotonin receptors deep in cortical layers and increases the amount of glutamate being released. This then activates AMPA and NMDA receptors. The activation of these receptors, in turn, causes increased brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF acts on neurons of the central nervous system and functions to help support the survival of existing neurons, while stimulating the growth and differentiation of new neurons and synapses. Recent human clinical trials have allowed another hypothesis to surface with psilocybin and assumes that alterations of different feedback loops between the cortex and the thalamus are responsible for a, quote, opening of the thalamic filter for sensory input, which can be seen as the cause of psilocybin-induced frontal hyperfrontality, and this can be seen in PET scan studies. Another study explained in an article for Time magazine explained that under high doses of psilocybin, many people experience a sense of ego transcendence, which occurs when an individual feels a oneness with the universe, and personal boundaries may no longer be existent. Many areas of the brain associated with self-awareness, including the medial prefrontal cortex and the posterior cingulate cortex, showed a reduction in activity in individuals under the influence of psilocybin. This could imply that ego transcendence might be facilitated by the reduction in these brain areas. This is interesting when considering the alternative traditions aim to produce ego transcendence by quieting the mind, typically through meditation. Due to recent research, psilocybin with psychological support has shown promise as a new treatment model in psychiatry. It was seen by researchers that cerebral blood flow and blood oxygen level dependent functional connectivity were measured again using an fMRI before and after treatment with psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression. fMRIs were taken pre- and post-treatment from 16 of the 19 patients. Decreased depressive symptoms were observed in all 19 patients at 1 week post-treatment, and 47% met criteria for decreased overall depressive symptoms at 5 weeks. Analysis of the entire brain revealed that post-treatment with psilocybin, there were decreases in cerebral blood flow in the temporal cortex, including the amygdala. Decreased cerebral blood flow in the amygdala correlated directly with reduced depressive symptoms. Neuroscientist David Newt believes that in depressed patients, brain circuits of the quote self region are too strong, stating people who engage in depressive thinking often have brains that are overconnected. Newt believes loosening those connections and creating new ones could give these patients intense relief of depressive symptoms through psilocybin. In another controlled experiment dealing with patients who had depression or anxiety, researchers from Johns Hopkins University found that 6 months after the experience with psilocybin, 80% of participants showed significant decreases in depressive symptoms and feelings of anxiety. Symptoms were compared pre- and post-treatment to the standard of psychiatric evaluation. Nick Fernandez, one participant in the study, stated that his experience on psilocybin took him, quote, on an emotional journey that helped him see a greater force than himself. He stated that something inside me snapped and I realized all my anxieties, defenses, and insecurities weren't something to worry about. Due to these recent studies, many believe that psilocybin can be used as a healing process in patients with anxiety and depressive symptoms. Multiple studies have also been done in cancer patients who experience depressive symptoms after chemo. In another study conducted by Johns Hopkins University, 51 patients with cancer were given a high placebo dose, then 5 weeks later were given a synthetic form of psilocybin. Statistics from the study included that 15% of participants had symptoms of nausea or vomiting during the high-dose session. Also, 21% of participants reported an episode of physical discomfort during, again, the high-dose session. In a follow-up 6 months after the study was conducted, it was reported that 78% of patients had lasting effects of decreased depressive symptoms and 83% had decreased symptoms of anxiety. Although widely outlawed and many see this drug as being highly dangerous, research has begun to prove that psilocybin has the increased potential to positively benefit individuals suffering from mental and mood disorders. Researchers have also stated that psilocybin holds a very low addictive quality. Now, let's get a small idea of what a minor trip may feel like. For the image seen on the screen, I'd like all viewers to stare directly into the center of the picture for 45 seconds, then look away. During those 45 seconds, do not distract your gaze anywhere else besides the center of the picture. Now, move your gaze away from the picture. Note the way that your vision was changing in response to the pattern. Although minor, this may give us a small idea of what it feels like to be on psilocybin. Hope you guys found this interesting. Thanks for watching.